1997. We're a team of 3 doctors tightly packed in a tiny twin-engine plane, loaded to the brim with bandages and medicines and medical supplies. We purposely lose our passports and all personal identification back in Uganda, flying the last 200 miles at treetop level to avoid being spotted by circling gunships. You see, we're on a secret mission to a terrorist nation that is fighting a bloody civil war, the Islamic Republic of Sudan. We drop fast, land in a dirt field, and anxiously unload our supplies. We get our airplane airborne and out of sight within minutes. The next day, we set up our field hospital in an abandoned two-room schoolhouse. The village around it is deserted because of this ongoing, decades-long civil war. A once thriving village hospital was just 200 yards away, ringed with landmines and now empty. It is our haunting daily reminder of the destruction of hate and of war. The next day, we push the chalkboard to the side and we operate on a badly wounded fighter. We do an above-knee amputation, and we don't know whether he's a good guy or a bad guy. Fights for the good guys or the bad guys, and it really doesn't matter because we are there as healers. The next case was a frightened young boy, feverish. He had a ruptured appendix. He will die without surgery. And the cases, coming slowly at first, began coming faster, and then even faster. And we operated every day, all day for the next 2 weeks. And then at night by flashlight. And the thing that amazed me, that really was unexpected, was that area around the schoolhouse, soon the fighting slowed and then stopped. And then that quiet calmness spread throughout the province. In some way, our healing brought dignity and self-worth, and in some way our healing brought trust and hope. Our healing present injected some sort of calming currency for peace, medicine as a currency for peace. Now, my days in the Sudan and throughout Africa really didn't just come out of the blue. I was lucky to be born in a medical family. My dad, a physician, a family doctor, and 2 older brothers, doctors as well. My earliest and fondest memories as a little boy were sitting in the front seat of my dad's green Chevrolet, my left arm propped up on a well-worn black doctor's bag, and we were going on a house call. I remember so well Dad driving up to a house, walking into a darkened bedroom, holding his hand. From across the room, I watched with wonder as he approached a gray-haired woman, sits on the side of the bed, and then reaches out and gently touches her hand. So intimately, so intensely, just listening and nodding. He reached into his doctor's bag and he pulled out a yellow vial and he gave it to the patient. The patient's face turned. She said something and then she smiled. The room instantly brightened. That heavy veil of despair and desperation was lifted. You could feel the compassion and you could feel the restored hope. And so it was right then right there in that very room that my own journey to health, hope, and healing began. And it was a natural course. I went to medical school and then into surgery, and then joined a group of pioneering surgeons who had a dream, and that dream was replacing the human heart. You see, at that point in time, we had no therapy at all for the otherwise healthy person who had a sick, worn-out heart. There was no therapy at all, nothing whatsoever. And the whole idea of being able to cut out a diseased heart, a worn-out heart, and then replacing it with a healthy heart was science fiction. It was an impossible dream. Yet these surgeons set that goal. They committed the resources, and heart transplantation became a reality. They solved what for ages had been unsolvable. They gave new life where there was absolutely no hope. And heart transplantation became my daily routine. At about the same time, little did I know that there was another, even greater challenge and a more existential threat to humanity. And it was just beginning to emerge. It was just on the horizon. It too was a disease for which there was no therapy. There was absolutely no treatment. It was caused by a little virus, a single little virus, a cagey virus, in that it would constantly change shape to avoid detection and treatment. The virus was HIV. The disease was AIDS. I first met that virus as a young surgical resident, and I read the first 5 cases that came out in 1981. All 5 of those individuals died of some mysterious, some unknown disease. We had no idea what that disease was. And then that little virus outsmarted us, and it outran us. That first year, a few hundred people died, and then a few thousand, and then the next year, 100,000, then the next year, 1 million. And within a few years, 3 million people were dying every single year from that single little virus. That's more people than died in the combined Korean and Vietnam wars every single year from that little virus. I first saw the virus at scale on my mission trips to Africa. HIV/AIDS patients would be overflowing at our clinics. I watched that little virus hollow out society, literally hollowing out the most productive in society at the prime of their life. The teachers, the civil servants, the military, the moms. In Botswana, life expectancy plummeted to 39 years of age. It was time to act, not just listen, not just talk. It was time to act. In 1994, I decided to run for the United States Senate, and I won. I had a certain responsibility because I was the only doctor in the Senate at the time. So I'd bring pictures back to my Senate colleagues so they would understand the death and the destruction associated with this little virus. The pictures would be of emaciated patients, 3 to a single cot, suffering from HIV/AIDS. One day in my Senate office, I received a call. Could you come to the Red Room of the White House to join the President of the United States? Please say nothing about this invitation. I knew something special was up. I walked into the Red Room the next night to join the President and a handful of others. The President, over the next 2 hours, spelled out in detail his ambitious, his bold plan. The President would commit U.S. leadership and unprecedented resources provided by the American people. His plan to eradicate HIV/AIDS from Africa. In the room, one said, "Mr. President, it can't be done." And the president responded, "My very best scientists just back from Africa tell me that it can." And then another said, "Mr. President, it costs too much. It's too expensive." And the president said, "My best researchers tell me that we can reduce the spending to a tenth of what it is today for treatment if we commit our science to it, if we commit our creativity to it, if we commit our innovation to it. But Mr. President, we have so many problems at home. If it's overseas, we need to focus right here at home." And the president said quickly, "No one should be condemned to die just because of where they were born. It is the moral thing to do. It is the right thing to do." And finally, Mr. President, it has never been done before. And President George W. Bush stood up and said, "That's exactly why the American people will do it." I was overwhelmed. This plan was so big and so bold and so ambitious. And based on my experiences in Africa and what I knew as a doctor, I knew this was big. So I just listened. But in the back of my mind, what was swirling was Sudan's currency of peace, courageous surgeons conquering the unconquerable in Dad's compassion. 3 weeks later, the president came to the Capitol and presented his plan at the State of the Union message. I took that plan back to the United States Senate. We wrote the legislation, and with bipartisan support, we passed the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, PEPFAR. It committed $15 billion in the fight against AIDS. That is more money than any president or any country in the history of the world has ever committed to fight a single disease. Our scientists got to work. U.S. industry stood up, and together they worked to create these powerful antiretrovirals. In Africa, infected teachers, infected civil servants regained strength and rebuilt their communities. In Botswana, life expectancy went from 39 years of age to 63 years. Death was replaced by life. Chaos was replaced by stability. Despair was replaced by hope. And looking back, what has been accomplished? There are 20 million people alive today who would otherwise not have lived. And there are tens of millions more who can access better health care for their other infectious diseases, for chronic diseases, for maternal and child health. But we can't rest. We can't rest. Regrettably, there's some in Washington today who say we need to cut global health. I only wish they could see what we have seen, the tremendous success that we've seen with PEPFAR, the small amount that we actually spend on global health, less than 1/4% of our nation's budget, less than 1/4% of our nation's budget. I only wish that they could understand, that they could see what we know, and that is that overseas stability and medicine can contribute to peace at home. History has told us that strength is the road to peace, but there's all kinds of strength. There's the strength of arms, there's the strength of healing hands, there's the strength of courage, and there's the strength of caring. And above all, there's the military strength that defends the life of the nation. And there's the medical strength that saves one life at a time. Generations have learned that painful lesson of peace through strength. And when it comes to military might, our nation is blessed with the greatest strength that the world has ever seen. Now let us match that force of arms with the greatest strength the world has ever seen when it comes to medical mercy. Let us practice that lesson of peace through healing. Let us remember that rogue regimes and hateful fanatics are not the only threats to peace. Disease is a threat to peace. Pandemics are a threat to peace. Illness and hopelessness are threats to peace. And when the world faces all of these threats of peace, now is exactly the wrong time to be cutting our federal spending on global health. The world is a safer and more secure place for us all when societies overseas are healthier and stronger. The world is safer and healthier for each one of us when individuals can provide for their families and create opportunities for their children without the worry of being struck down by a disease that could be easily prevented or easily cured. To be blunt, you don't go to war with somebody who has just saved the life of your child. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." What we know today and what we've learned is that a threat to health anywhere is a threat to peace anywhere. We can bring more peace to the world and to ourselves, not just by deterrence, but by compassion, by the healing hands, and by medicine as a currency for peace.